So I'm standing up at the front. You've got an auditorium of something like 12 rows of folks who just saw the other. And nice to have you with us. Thank you to Shai, who's waking up early on a Sunday morning in Tel Aviv. And we have Aziz Abu Sara, who is staying up very late in Greenville, South Carolina tonight. So Aziz just got back actually from walking with the Olympic torch in Italy with one of the folks that appeared at the very end of this film. And one of the last scenes, Maoz Inon, who lost his parents, whose parents were killed on October 7th, was standing on a hilltop and hugging one of our mutual friends named Osama. And Aziz has spent the last couple of years traveling the world as an advocate for peace with Maoz Inon. And they were just together carrying the Olympic torch in the name of peace and a better future in Israel and Palestine together. And Aziz is just back in the US and in a different kind of Winter Olympics where there is ice and rain and sleet. And we were worried that we might lose power, but we seem to be okay. So I'm going to open the questions with this one, Shai and Aziz. Knowing many of the characters in this film and some of their personal stories, there is a sense in which many of these folks have an identity which is both insider and outsider. Folks that have in many ways kind of had to create distance between themselves and their own communities in order to be able to see the picture in a different light and adopt a certain kind of approach to this reality and this situation. And yet insider in deeply holding their sense of self, their sense of identity as a Palestinian or an Israeli in this broad story. And I'm wondering if you can just speak to this insider-outsider thing and how it kind of functions in the growing of community of people that are committed to the kind of work that we saw in this film. The other, either personally and sort of as you've seen it, how is it possible to take enough space to be able to look upon the situation in a new light and yet maintain a deep relationship and sense of commitment to one's own people identity.
Okay. Shai, do you want to start? You want me to start?
I can start.
Go for it.
Hi, everybody. Great to have you, and thank you very much for having us. It's a very interesting question. And I think many of us, when we grow up, here, we have a tendency that we're pushed to a corner that you have to decide whose side are you on. Are you pro-Israeli? Are you pro-Palestinian? Do you support the cause and the act, or don't you? And do you want to push to another side? And reality is far more complex than that, but it's a difficult thing to find out. Nobody teaches you about atrocities that your side is doing and about how empathy should be offered to the other side. And I think many of the people that you saw while speaking on the film, they had a journey to go through to understand that, reality is, or the truth is somewhere perhaps in between. And you don't need to advocate for the Israelis to live in peace or prosperity or for the Palestinians. You should advocate for both. And to be a pro-shared life activist or Israeli/Palestinian activist. And by that, you can really go and offer this empathy to the other side and try to see how things look sometimes moments away from your home. And yes, sometimes it would negate the place where you grow up and the education that you received, and there will be people who will turn against you. That's a natural act to do. I think it happens in any place that sides that are supposed to be enemies are actually showing empathy and looking for peace to the other side. It's a process that I think a lot of activists have to do. Some come from a background that is more supportive in a way and always showed that there's a more complex realities, but often people are not. And there is some clarity that will come to a person when they start this journey of asking themselves what's going on. It's a journey, though, that you have to start at one point. And it will take you far a lot of times. It takes some time, courage, and great efforts to do. But in the end, it confronts you with just asking very basic questions of, can we be also wrong on some things? And I think once you're open to say we might, doesn't mean that your whole reality of your narrative changes, but you're starting to see things differently and to start to ask for answers from people on what's called the other side, in a way. That's how I see things. Aziz.
Thanks, Shai.
I disagree with everything. No, I'm joking. Uh, the problem with doing this on Zoom, I cannot see people's reaction to my terrible jokes. So I cannot tell if you laughed or you don't have a good sense of humor. You do have a good sense of humor, but
I have my glasses.
no, I agree with what Shai is saying. I think we all, as you said, grow up with that sense of us versus them in some ways. And in some way that's evolutionary thing. It's normal. It's the you stick with the people around you. It's your family, then it's your neighborhood, then it's your community, then it's your country. That's how people often see the world. It's who are the people I know, and you build your point of view of the world based on those around you. There's tons of research that actually shows that the most likelihood for you to change your opinion on something is when somebody in your family or friends have that opinion. And they the most likely people to convince you to adopt this new opinion. So people around us shape who we are. And for us to challenge some of the opinions of people around us, it comes at a great cost because especially when you're talking about big issues that has to do, as Shai said, with crimes and atrocities and figuring out that not everything you told is true or accurate, and learning about how narratives work, and in many ways learning about how much we are manipulated by politics and by politicians. My wife, who's actually not from far away from you guys are, from right now, her family live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and grew up in that area, went to school in Spokane. She did her research on some of this, and she did a TED Talk a few years back in which she talked about how we are normalized, or there are daily habits that we expose to that creates this us versus them and turns us into almost militantly violent against people who we see them as the other. So this is a reality, and it's a broken reality, and it's a terrible reality in the world we live in today. And I think the way we deal with it is we kind of create a new group, a new community, where that community is not based on the us versus them, and it's not based on things we don't decide. Shai didn't choose to be an Israeli. I did not choose to be a Palestinian. You kind of grow up with these identities, but there are things we do choose, and those things are the values we willing to live by or not. And that's a new group, I think, has to honor the values that talk about equality, about the human dignity, about safety, about security, about recognition, uh, about justice, about liberation. And if we agree to those values, and it doesn't matter if you're an Israeli, if you're a Palestinian, if you're Russian, if you're Ukrainian, if you wherever, if you're American, if you're Republican, if you're Democrat, it doesn't really matter those labels. I think we should focus much more on what values we believe in rather than on those labels. And the moment you say, yeah, for me, equality matters, then if your country, your government, your whatever tells you, oh no, this person's not equal to you because of their nationality or skin color, or because we think their culture is not as enlightened as our culture, then you reject those views. And that's when you build that community, it becomes your closest community, because I think values are the most important thing we can hold on.
Thanks, Aziz. Just so that everyone kind of knows what they're in for, we're going to be speaking for about 4 minutes total. About 15 minutes into that, I'm going to ask one for Aziz and Shai. Give me a thumbs up if you're kind of freezing just a little bit on screen. So just give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. For that, I'm going to ask just first. Yeah, you still can. Great. Maybe just kind of concise answers to a couple of these next questions. I met Aziz in the context of being hired by him to work at a place called Medji Tours, which launched its flagship experience, which is a dual narrative tour in Israel and Palestine, guided together in tandem by a Jewish Israeli and a Palestinian tour guide. Aziz co-founded that project and that tour company, and I met Shai in the context of him helping me to build out what became a Jerusalem day tour that was offered quite successfully once a week, and building out the kind of the script and the routing that then I would see Shai and a Palestinian counterpart deliver in Jerusalem many a time. And the experience of this is to watch two people in a dialogue where they're often running into one another and trying to figure out how to, without speaking over one another, kind of work through and be honest about the things that they see that they're the same, the things they see that are different. In this film, Mira Awad spoke about guarding one's narrative. When something comes up that challenges, it stings. Like even if you've already kind of been acclimated to the space of building peace and speaking across dialogue. And I'm wondering that Aziz and Shai, when you're guiding or when you're in these kinds of conversations and dialogue, what is one thing that you hear a lot that still, even at this moment, in given your experience, stings? What is that thing that is a visceral piece that feels like it's an almost insurmountable difference that can't that almost can't be overcome?
I'm I'm not sure if I understood the question right. You're asking if there's an issue as in a narrative complexity that is not possible to overcome by the guides or
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the people attending the tour. I mean, there are, I can think, for example, terminologies. When we talk about Gaza, for most Palestinians, for most of us, we describe it as a genocide. For many Israelis, they will not describe it as a genocide. So that's a narrative issue. When we're talking about 1948, sometimes there are narratives that diverge differently. When it comes to Palestinians, we talk about ethnic cleansing. We talk about many massacres that happened. I think when Israelis talk about it, obviously they talk about Independence Day and so on, and talk about the Jews from Arab countries who also were ended up coming to Israel, were kicked out from their homes. So you have these narratives. I think language is a big one. Even when we stand, if Shai and I standing in front of the wall, or as Israelis often call it, the fence, that's already a different terminology. And learning how to deal with using different terminologies can be challenging because terminologies are triggering. Most Palestinians refer to the wall as apartheid wall. Most Israelis, most American Jews find that problematic terminology. But the way I look at it, and Maoz and I had to deal with it. We just finished writing a book, The Future is Peace, and we decided we will use all the terminologies and we will allow every kind of word to be used. So if he's referring to something, he will refer to it in the way Israelis or American Jews or whoever is often referred to it. And if I'm referring to something, I'll refer to it the way Palestinians refer to it. And it's important that we don't silence the other and listen. And sometimes we might understand, we might accept, we might not accept, but at least understand where that thought is coming from. The issue to me is when one tells the other, you're not allowed to say this, or unless you say this, then I'm not going to talk to you. I think it's a mistake. Because the goal is for us to work together toward the future. We're not going to ever agree on the past. What we can agree on is the future.
Thanks, Aziz. Shai, what piece comes at you that kind of stings when it challenges the narratives that still you're holding someplace deep?
Yeah. So I think sometimes we will find things that we have a challenge to, or we have an argument or discussion on, just to agree that the violence on our side is deliberate. I think that's a difficult one, and I often see that in conversations. I think both Israelis and Palestinians could admit that the side and their narrative and their country or people have done acts which are extremely brutal, but was it deliberate? Was there a core of waking up in the morning and asking to do as much mayhem as possible? I think both of us have some kind of difficulty to accept that. And when we're pushed to the corner, then you see those things rise every now and then. Is Israel interested in having extreme settlers attack Palestinian villages? Is that the core idea of the country, or does it happen kind of accidentally? That's something that comes to conversation. Did Hamas have deliberate sex crimes on October 7? Something that all Israelis 100% will say absolutely yes. And I think for Palestinians, that's a more difficult thing to own sometimes. So we see that, and maybe another issue would be the holy places. I think many of us activists have a tendency to think together over a shared future, and maybe Aziz, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of us are not coming from a very, very religious center. And then when we're confronted with religious folks, we find out that those items are not only very important for them, but like they're not willing to give up on what they're interested of having in those sites. I think the best example for that could be Temple Mount / El Aqsa compound in Jerusalem, which is holy for both Israelis and Palestinians. When you bring in activists who are more secular and they can often agree on a lot of things, we can say, okay, we can find a way to agree on those things. But many people in our communities are very religious. And for these people, they see those sites somewhat different than the way we see them and the future in those sites. And how do we share, or do we share? Can you share your holiest site? And that's a bridge that I don't know if we can overcome. I think religious leaders, as much as I'm a secular, I'm an atheist, yet I think religious leaders, they have great importance in being a part of this dialogue and peacemaking. And unfortunately, we're not seeing enough, rabbis and imams taking a part of this movement. And they have a spot there. They need to be a part of that as well to represent millions of very religious people in both of the groups.
Thanks, Shai. So one more, the last question I'll ask, and then we're going to go to audience questions. I'll ask you guys, and I might even like jump in just to try to hold your answers to like 2 minutes, even though it's a question you could probably talk for 15 or 20 about. Is this movie is, in a certain sense, when I see this movie, I feel like it is aspirational and it is ripe for this moment. And in another way, I see this film and it feels like we're talking about a paradigm which is outdated. It relies on a 30-year-old paradigm, sort of post-Oslo, of the idea that contact and humanization of, quote, the other, the name of the film, is the way forward. That's going to make all the difference. And yet, after 30 years of kind of pursuing that paradigm in the peace space, we know that it doesn't feel that we're necessarily closer to a resolution to this conflict. And I'm wondering, are you sure that this path that you've chosen is the path that is ultimately going to yield the results that you're looking for? Are some days you wake up and you say, you know what, forget it. Everyone else is right. As they said at the beginning of this film, most Israelis and Palestinians agree that it's impossible to make peace. So what do you think? Is this outdated, or is this still just right for this moment? And if you can, in about 2 minutes. Thanks. Raise hands. If you want to ask a question, we're looking for hand. Okay, you got a index card there to fill it out. Thank you. This is my last question, so we're going to go to the index cards in a second. Aziz or Shai, who wants to start?
Sure. I can start. I think the tools can be outdated, but the vision isn't. So, was Oslo the right agreement in itself? Oslo had many issues, many problems. I think we learned a lot from Oslo and the failures of Oslo, where things worked and where things didn't. And look, that's the case in every successful peace agreement that happened. It's the first negotiation, the first round almost never was successful in any conflict. You look at Northern Ireland, you look at literally everywhere. We can walk through the whole world of conflicts, and you have attempt after attempt after attempt, and you learn from each attempt, and you've learned what hasn't worked, and then you make it work. So the tools might not be the same. I wouldn't want to replicate what Oslo has done 30 years ago, but I would, in the same time, not give up on the vision because the vision of peace, of coexistence, is the only one that we can really rally behind. The alternative to that is one side committing a genocide or full ethnic cleansing. So I started with saying it's all about values. And it is pretty scary to see where the world is moving today. And I would argue that what happened in Gaza in the last year has affected the whole world. Because the moment you allow for certain things to happen with impunity, it means others will do it. And the moment the US, for example, now can feel comfortable going to another country, kidnap a leader, be a very criminal leader, or going to a country and say, we want to take your territory because we feel it's okay. And Russia feels the same, and China feels the same. The moment you break a threshold, it's very hard to go back. And so the alternative is really horrible. And when we look at it and say, oh, but this is only okay here, if we just allow for a little bit of this here so our side can win, what we're looking at is a disaster for the whole world. And I can't accept, I can't tell you that we will be 100% successful in our vision, but I think the alternative to our vision is what we see today. 30 years ago, there was way less violence, way less people hurt. My brother was killed 35 years ago, but the violence was nothing of what we see today. And the issues were way less complicated than it is today. And by waiting and by kicking the ball down and by allowing extreme people to take helm of leadership, here's where we are. And I think things will only get worse unless we have a U-turn.
We can't see them at all, Aziz, so I don't know if you can still hear us and we're good.
Oh,
Maybe no. Aaron, can you give us some cue that that we're still running?
Got it. Can you hear us? Anybody?
yeah.
I can hear.
Yeah.
Did you hear Aziz?
Where disease? Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Two. Shy.
I'll follow in short if you want.
Thanks. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
First of all, to answer your question, this is, yeah, of course it's frustrating. You know, I teach young Israelis, and to see what they're going through in the last 2 years, things are becoming more extreme. And this is a very, very difficult feeling. There's no question on that. But, you know, if I'm translating your question in my head, you're asking in a way, what about the movement that rose 30 years ago to solve a conflict that's about 100 years old and yet did not achieve that? Are we frustrating about it? Did we go in a bad path? I strongly agree with Aziz that we don't have another possibility. If you believe that people have a right to live in peace and harmony in their homes, then what other option do you have of being in this cycle of asking for a shared existence and life? And sometimes I think we're very focused on how do we do it. You see that when with internationals coming to the conversation, they're asking, okay, how are we going to solve this? It's going to be one state? Is it going to be two states? How exactly are you going to run a confederacy? Who's moving out? And these are technical questions when we need the greater people to understand that we need to live in this kind of reality. Now, those things, they move around. I mean, 40 years ago, the majority of Israelis, at least can speak of my side, they didn't believe in what is called the two-state solution. And in the last 30 years, there was a rise. Over 50% of Israelis believed or wanted it to happen. Did they know how to happen? Did they really support it? I don't know, but that's what they answered in the polls. And they had some kind of a positive approach towards that. That shifted in the last 2 years and declined. But it is giving us something to work with over teaching people on our side that we should be together, that we should listen to one another, that nobody's going anywhere. I mean, these are very strong existence realities, even 2 years after the most vicious war that we had here. Nobody's going anywhere. People are here. Now, how should they live? And how should we live with our people? It took 30 years out of 100 of a conflict to reach us here. Apparently, it's going to take much more to solve. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And we need to keep on and continuing this journey that we have because, yeah, we don't have another possibility.
I'm going to pass the mic to my brother, who's actually going to ask a couple of questions coming from friends in the room. And again, keeping answers so we can get to 2 or 3 of them. Kind of tight because we've got just about 15 minutes left. Passing the mic.
Well,
Hi, everyone. Jeremy Aarons. Going very good. Hello, brother. I'll just briefly plug for the Medji Tour, day tour to the city that I went on 4 or 5 years ago. Highly recommended. Really, really interesting experience. Again, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. We'll bring a note card for you. I'll start off. How do you deal with anger, your own, and the anger directed at you from within your own community, within your own communities?
it's very simple for me. It's not as much as people think it is, and I think there are legitimate things that why people are angry about sometimes our work or angry because of the reality. And if they're angry about our work, I try to listen but I don't let it distract me from my work. Try to listen, try to talk to them. If they're angry about the reality and the killing and the just the situation, then I tell them I'm also angry. And I think everyone is angry, and let's use our anger to fuel the kind of work we're doing to stop this reality instead of adding fuel to it. So, anger is normal. I think if you look at what's happening there and you don't have emotions, something is wrong. You should be angry. It's about what you do with your anger.
Yeah, this and maybe empathy. I mean, we're trying to portray empathy as much as possible to the other side, so-called, right? If I'm an Israeli activist, I meet Palestinians. Obviously, empathy is a part of life. But when I'm encountered by Israelis, many times they're very upset by the work that we do. Okay, their work, it's worth to listen and to understand what's the situation. They need empathy also. They're afraid that our work, let's say, would bring a security hazard to them, right? More freedom of Palestinians would bring attacks in the big cities in Israel. That's the fear. Okay, let's listen to it. Let's acknowledge what is the fear. Let's empathize with them. And now let's try to solve it from a point of view of we understand who you are. We understand what are your fears. I mean, I come from your side, you who is coming to shout at me at a demonstration. We're both Israelis, we both served in the army. Do you really think that another wall is going to bring you more security? Did that proven to be right? But if I don't acknowledge your fear, then it will be more difficult to reach you. And that is a tool, I think, that should always be used, especially when you're encountering people from your outside telling you that you're wrong.
Thanks, Aziz. I see someone just finishing a question, but here's another one. What question do you wish people would stop asking you about the conflict, and what do you wish they would ask instead?
I'm gonna borrow this one from Maoz because we just were asked this recently, and I thought his answer was really good. Um, is peace really possible? I think it's a question that's frustrating because every conflict ends eventually, and we have hundreds of examples around the world of smaller conflicts, larger conflicts, country conflicts that end. And the idea that, oh, well, but how can you end a conflict when you have bad leaders? I don't know much of good leaders who ended conflicts. Actually, in most cases, the people who sign peace agreements are war criminals, are terrorists, are people who've committed tons of crimes. You look at Northern Ireland again, it was people who had tons of blood on their hands who signed the agreement. You look at Colombia, it was former defense minister, president, who signed a peace agreement with the FARC. Both had so much blood on their hand. Nobody considered them good people until the agreement was signed, and then they were good people. So I think we forget the reality. Even you look at Israel, Menachem Begin was a wanted terrorist by the British and was the most anti-peace person in Israel. He won the election saying we will not have peace with Egypt. And then Anwar Sadat was a military general who fought against Israel in 1967 and led the war in 1973. And you bring those two people, nobody thought will be able to sign a peace agreement. So I think it's a question that forgets or ignores history and comes from a place of, oh, well, can we really believe it? And the thing is, if you don't have vision and you don't believe it's possible, you will do nothing to advance it. And that's what worries me. Instead, I think the question is, how do we get there as soon as possible? What can we do to get there sooner than waiting for it to magically happen? Because nothing magically happens.
A question that we don't want to be asked anymore. Uh, I think the technicalities is something that is often being brought up. I kind of mentioned that before, but I think often it happens that there's kind of a thought that something technical wasn't right, and that is the core issue right now. And if only we could understand that, or we can offer another technicality, we can solve our issues. I think I often see that with groups of lobbyists who come over to Israel and Palestine, and they're trying to learn the whole conflict in, I don't know, 7 days, 8 days, and offer this kind of one solution. And now, okay, go with that. This settlement will be expanded, this one will be removed, and that's it, you solved all your issues. And things are more complex than that, obviously.
Mhm.
That's an issue of, but I don't know how we're going to solve it. But to be honest, it's not that we have a magic answer on the technical issues right now. And also, the reality changes and moves, you know. Things that were offered 25 or 20 years ago, they're very different right now. As the realities shift, we can see that with West Bank and with Gaza. So our problem is not a technical problem, is how I see that right now. And I think we should avoid from this question of one state, two states. Not that it's not important. If Palestinians will be citizens of Israel in one state, that is a very different reality of two sovereign countries standing side by side. But it doesn't change the core of asking, do we agree to live with people on, again, the so-called other side amongst us, on the other side of the border or in our cities? So here's one question that maybe we can find better ones.
Another question, and just to keep in mind, we only have about 5 more minutes, so keep your answers accordingly. In the movie, thousands of people were moving towards peace. How was their will subverted? I think this is thinking about the change from October 7th, after October 7th.
Can you repeat or reframe the question? I couldn't hear well.
Thinking about the peace was attempted and worked towards, but it was not successful in a lot of ways. So maybe why was that shifted? How did that come to be? And what was happening amongst the Israelis and Palestinians to have that not go about?
So you're asking about post October 7 reality of peace activism?
Yes, yeah, that would be a great question. Thanks.
I'll answer briefly just from Israeli point of view. Just like imagine if you're not a peace activist and you want a military solution to this conflict. That's one way of looking at it. Let's say Israel just encountered what is the most terrible war of its history. It was the longest one. We lost close to 1,000 soldiers. We lost a lot of civilians in the day of the attack, and we we were in the war that killed over 70,000 Palestinians. Now you ask yourself, two years after, right? The ceasefire was signed 2 years after. Are we in a better situation than we were before? Did we win this conflict and now we're super strong? And what kind of reality are we living in? And if the answer is no, that after 2 years we couldn't accomplish as a country a successful victory over Hamas even in Gaza, no matter what harsh conditions we took. Israel never fought in a way that it fought right now, and the killing of civilians once again was just huge. Then how could you look at this conflict and say, oh, there is a military solution? There is a martial way to do that. This is reality that I hope more Israelis will get, but I mean, we've been looking and seeing that for the last years already, as activists and people are engaged in peace. Violence cannot be the solution. And this was very proven to be the reality of the last 2 years.
I think that's good. We'll try maybe another question instead of me adding in.
I'm going to close this, guys, and we're going to say goodbye after this question. So you can wave to us as you're on the way out. I want to thank you guys for showing up at odd hours like this. Aziz, I hope the power stays on for the next overnight. Sleep well, stay warm, and Shai. Have a great week. Shavua Tov. And what is your sort of parting message here? What do we do to continue to advance this work, advance this mission? And specifically, this is sort of a softball for you, as is like it's an elevator pitch. But what is the role of tourism education, of coming to see the space, to hear and to see this work happening on the ground and actually propelling it forward? What do we have to do to advance this work? How does that happen? And maybe specifically because you're both in this field, how does tourism play a part?
I think that the thing that makes travel a great way to help is that travel introduces you to stories, to people, and then you can go back and amplify those stories, legitimize these stories. I think the one thing that frustrates me sometimes about our work is that it's not really hard to get to where we need to go. It takes people starting to talk about it more. It takes people amplifying these voices more. It takes people pushing their community leaders, their politicians to listen to these voices. Uh, you can argue there aren't enough Israeli and Palestinian peace activists, but there are many still. I mean, the last big gathering we did in Jerusalem had around 10,000 people. That's a lot of people. And yet, I can tell you, most American, most even Israeli, international media did not cover it. So if we can't get media to cover it, then it depends on you to tell the stories of the work that peace activists are doing and to come, to witness, to meet, and to spread the word, and to convince your community to be connected with these organizations, individuals, and so on. And when you come and visit, and this is quite common for both Christians and Jewish trips that come, there aren't as many Muslim trips that comes to the Holy Land, is to do a concrete effort to meet with these groups, with the peacemakers there, and not just have, a 20 minutes, 1 hour, okay, we did a checklist, but to actually really engage with that community and to build partnerships with those who are doing this work.
If I could follow this shortly, I think that when you're looking at the conflict from the outside, it's very easy to kind of choose a side, to say, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, I get it, this is what I read, this is what I understand. And one of the only ways to overcome that is as Aziz said, to go and visit those people. If you have dinner with a person at their home, okay, you disagree with on a lot of things, but you see them as a human and you allow them to tell their story and what they're afraid of and why do they see things the way they do, you're allowing yourself to see them in a different way and to not just humanize them, but to be able to hear their story and to find a more complex reality. What if these guys are, not that these guys are not the good and these are whatever, but what if they also have some truth and they have some part of this reality as well? And we can find the answers in both of the groups and not just choose one and disqualify the other in a way.
Guys, if you can't hear us or see the room that well, now's the part where we clap for you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Thanks to everyone for sharing. Thanks to everyone for being in the room, for watching the film, for supporting this work in that way, and to Medji Tours and Services for putting on the film festival, including this in it. I'm passing the mic back to Neil, the executive director of Medji Tours and Services for Sport. Thanks again, Aziz and Shai. See you soon.
Bye bye.